Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Artificial DM. So I gotta say, this tale of Loseph Yennin and Uncle, I messed up on a couple of things, but hopefully I'll be able to convey everything properly in this tale of Loseph Yennin and the Revolution. Once again, thanks to Ramifrix for sending this in to me. So, wonder of wonders, got a day off work, so I'm taking the opportunity to get some writing done, including the second half of this story. Alright, on to part 2 of the story. After valiantly slaying the bear, supplying the camp with enough meat that everyone was actually able to get a portion, and totally not pissing his pants, Loseph was now firmly in the good graces of the militiamen. Lieutenant Foppington, naturally, tried to take credit, but couldn't overcome the avalanche of situational bonuses standing atop a slain bear, and holding its gushing heart conferred. And as the rule of dibs demands, we who slew the bear got first pick at the juicy bits. The elf, naturally, abstained. She actively did not contribute. Uncle would have actively tried to brain her if she did try to claim some of the juicy giblets. Loseph reached into its gut. Looks like Mama snacked on some soldiers at some point. Bloody man-eater. Xena jammed her hand into its ribcage and yanked out a magical gauntlet. Sweet! And Uncle went for his go at looting it, and rolled a 2, pulling out a kidney. Is good protein. I will enjoy this. I also insisted on harvesting more organs for spell components, totally not drying them and peddling them as traditional medicine, and especially insisted upon ripping the good eye out of the cub. Not for any special reason, but because screw the baby bear. Uncle didn't even wait to get to the campfire. He just popped the eye into his mouth and chewed. Ugh. A few hours later, the early hours of the morning are filled with the smoke of fire pits and the smell of bear meat being cooked and smoked. Morale was through the roof compared to yesterday, and supposedly we were half a day out from the Orc army, so the militia was actually marching with some urgency. Loseph was marching at the front with the other 3 of us. People were marching in formation and with decent pacing, following Loseph's lead as he exercised his military experience to provide an example. Things were looking good. Imminent death didn't seem so imminent or deadly anymore. This is where the session ends for the night. The next session resumes a few weeks later when Tay, the absentee from last session, due to obligations by Dint Sprog rearing, couldn't make it to Shadowrun again. We decided to pick up DSA again, and picked up after having arrived at our next campsite, supposedly just an hour from where the orcs were meant to be camped. This brought the reality of the situation back to the people of the militia. Smoked bear meat only went so far in terms of warding off the existential dread of possibly dying, and or being eaten alive by orcs. Not in that order. Loseph meant to assuage these fears. In the dead of night, when the guardsmen of the nobles sat in their own little enclave in the center of the camp, now more marginalized than ever by the general masses of the militia after the bear incident, Loseph got a few of the men together and told them his plan. He ruled that, prisoners and serfs they may be, but a bunch of shiny bastards had no right to pit us against an orc army in a blatant suicide run. This could not stand. It was time for revolution! They bought the plan and began spreading it throughout the camp. As the nobles were getting deep into their cups of wine, people began moving their belongings and sleeping places away from the nobles' tents. They also made sure nothing was downwind. Some people may have caught on as to why already. Soon, the nobles were alone, only surrounded by the odd tree and some bushes. Loseph now simply had to execute his coup. Uncle had the perfect solution for this. After speaking with Loseph for a bit, the Borlandian managed to talk a man out of his rot-gut booze and gave Uncle an odd look as he handed it to him. Uncle tore a rag off his tabard, shoved it into the bottle, and the invention thus dubbed by Loseph as the Maraskan cocktail was born. It would be the symbol and engine of our revolt. Uncle handed it to Loseph. He lit it on a bonfire and threw it into the nobility's camping area. These men, expecting to have to possibly pick up and fight orcs in the dead of night, they so cleverly thought that surrounding themselves on all sides with peasants would provide them time to ready up as their meat shields died, did not stand a chance. Not while dressed in full armor and regalia. Their heavy armor did them no favors, as the burning alcohol set their tent and all their wine and spirits ablaze as well. The tent caught light like kindling, and the main tent went up in a massive fireball as the militia cheered. Those that didn't cook in their armor immediately fled the tent, and were skewered on the spears of the waiting militiamen as they screamed and tried to put themselves out. The night smelled like cooked pork this time. It was the smell of victory and revolution. We partied that night. The nobles' booze was all gone, and so was their food. Any armor was grafted to still sizzling flesh, and the weapons would burn at the touch, so we bided our time until the fires went down and the corpses cooled. The following morning, we awoke and cheered our good fortune. Loseph collected slightly melted and charred badges, sewed them into his sash, and then... well, we weren't really sure what to do next. Many men wanted to go home to their families and to their homes. Others wanted to leave the country because it was going south in ways that was hardly a serf's business. The main problem was that we hadn't accomplished our primary goal, and the people back home would know we didn't when the enemy came a-knocking. So we deliberated about how to go about solving these issues in a truly democratic way when we heard some grunting from the bushes. And this time, it wasn't a bear. What smells so good? Everyone turned to see an orc pop his head up from out of a bush, then another. Then the entire forest was full of the bastards. We may have forgotten about the orcs for a bit. Also, I should mention, Kay was having so much fun with this. On top of all of this, he was doing an, I shit you not, Yoda voice for the orcs, minus the backward speak. Loseph stood up and approached the orcs.
That is the smell of cooked nobles, stewing in their own booze.
One of the orcs grunted.
Me like a little wine glazing on my meat.
Do you want them?
We were all choking on our drinks, laughing as we stared at my brother.
You offering? That very kind.
The biggest orc steps forward.
Humans usually not so accommodating.
Well, we were originally out here to,
He hesitates.
Fight an invading orc army. But we decided we wanted no part.
Invading?
The orc lets out a bark of laughter.
We've no invading. This retaliatory strike. Humans come and raise our home, provoke conflict, and take advantage of struggling socio-economic landscape of our home.
We all took a second to consider that. So, what you are saying, Xena says, is that we have a common enemy. An enemy that is now dead.
That is so, yes.
Still doing the Yoda voice, by the way, just slightly deeper. Oh, and I forgot to mention this, but we were also out here to rescue the daughter of the provincial ruler. She was kidnapped some years ago, and a high priority secondary objective was to bring her back. And stone cold revolutions we may be, we still had a heart.
Oh yeah, but what about the captured girl?
Uncle asked.
We were told you stole her. What? That ugly thing? No, she was beginning of this whole debacle. Human man sells her to us in exchange for trade routes. Say she make beautiful bride. Lies! Then human man disguise soldiers and spies as merchants, uses route as sabotage opportunities.
Then
Loseph decides to capitalize as any good capitalist socialist does.
Would you like to trade?
Orcs always open to new enterprise. No trading in indentured servants, though. That was first mistake.
The girl for the nobles, then.
Deal! Bring forth the ugly one,
he calls over his shoulder.
She not too pleasant to look at, but she speaks good Orcish and very homely and dutiful at chores. Hardly measures up to a real woman, though.
One of the orcs brings a girl in about her late teens forth. She's gorgeous, even when dressed in traditionally Orcish clothing and with untamed wild flaxen hair. Her beauty is actually so striking that Loseph has to roll to not be dazed for a moment as he was closest.
Yes. She is horrific. Absolutely. A poor trade, but we accept, if only for humanitarian reasons.
You mean orcitarian reasons?
Yes.
The orc leader pats her on the shoulder, says something to her in Orcish, and nods at us. She shrugs, grunts something in Orcish, and comes over to us and dutifully stands at Loseph's side.
Decent trade.
The orc leader sniffs the air.
Meat smells warm, too. Not too hot, either. Love coming to a surprise home-cooked meal.
Then he seems to consider something.
Oh, and you can keep human shell when we done. It probably a bit bent from heat warping, but still good for bashing.
Your generosity is breathtaking, comrade orc.
Come, friends, we feast!
The militia made some distance as the orcs got busy. It was like a bunch of gym chads at a lobster buffet. The noises alone. I can't remember if sanity damage was a thing in Dashwazaz, but if it was, I'm sure some of the levies were suffering it. Some of them were just kids. After they ate, the orcs waved goodbye, headed home, and we piled the scraps into a cart, broke and buried the bones, and got our militia-wide alibi straight. We defeated the orcs to a man, the nobles heroically fell in battle, and we saved the girl, who is now radically more orky. Seems she adjusted pretty well to orc society, even missed it a bit. We took the time on the walk back to talk to her, get to know her a little. She was robust after years of living with the orcs. Not quite Amazon from Dragon's Crown, but certainly not the svelte, demure beauty most teen noble daughters were meant to be. A change in diet and exercise regimen does a lot. Uncle approved. But because I didn't want to start courting the GMPC after Kay just spent an hour talking in a Yoda voice, because that would have been weird, I just left it at a comment that Uncle thought he would never find an actual woman outside of his homeland. Cue mock offense and gas from the Xena and Elf players. Eventually, we got back to the province, returned the girl, the militia dispersed, the surviving criminals, including ourselves, were given freemanship, and we got an invitation from the girl's father to visit his manor for dinner. That is where the session ended, and we unfortunately didn't ever go past that, but it was still a hell of a time. And that is the end of the tale of Loseph Yennin, master of cutting linguistics and leader of the 5-minute revolution. I got to play my XP mean character, Xena got hers, the elf was as useless as a water goddess, and we got to stick it to some haughty nobles. More than likely, this was not at all how Kay intended things to end. Or he did, and he's just a step below Creed in tactical genius. But he rolled with everything and improvised masterfully. So part of this story retelling was both an homage to the memory of Loseph Yennin, Master Revolutionary, as it was giving him props as a GM. 2 sessions it may have been, but he never let the pace drop or something catch him off guard for more than a second. It may have been because I was still a teenager at the time, but those 2 sessions are one of the most fondest stories I retell whenever the topic of favorite sessions come up in the server or at the table. And that is the end of Loseph Yennin. Honestly, pretty awesome story. Still an RPG glory story, and I know some of you have been voicing your opinions that you think RPG glory stories are a little boring, but honestly, I would rather just tell stories that haven't been heard before. So even if you have an RPG glory story, or an RPG horror story, or anything in between that fits, let me know by either sending me a message on Reddit, Twitter, or leaving a comment here in the comments below. You can also always send me an email if it's a longer story. Be sure to like the video if you enjoyed it. And until next time, hope you feel inspired.